Years after discovering my wife entwined with another man, she reaches out to me and says, "Greetings and welcome. Delight in the offerings, join our community, and activate notifications." David made his entrance a full 15 minutes ahead of the scheduled time. He strolled over to a table by the window, placed an order for modest coffee, and began to observe the bustling scene beyond the glass. He idly toyed with the silver ring adorning his finger, a familiar gesture that surfaced whenever anxiety started to creep in. Though his face wore a mask of tranquility, his eyes whispered a different tale. Those who observe intently would discern traces that the passage of time has failed to obliterate. His eyes wandered, probing the surroundings as if a fragment of his own existence lay concealed somewhere along that street. The minutes stretched out, seeming to linger far beyond their true passage. He folded his arms, then released them, his hand gliding over his face as he inhaled deeply. He fiddled with his watch, glancing at his phone repeatedly, fully aware that no messages awaited him. This was no ordinary gathering. It was, indeed, an opportunity to finally conclude a narrative that had lingered in uncertainty for far too long. As he lingered in anticipation, memories surged forth, vibrant echoes of laughter, adventures, celebrations, and vows made. Yet, inevitably, they were followed by the sharp sting of disillusionment, heartache, and shattered faith. He attempted to cast those memories aside, yet they surged back with an intensity that seemed to echo every detail leading him to this very moment. As she stepped through the cafe door, he sensed her presence even before his gaze fell upon her. His body seemed to remember her presence, as if time had no power to erase that connection. Her gait, the manner in which she slung her bag over her shoulder, and the familiar way she tied her hair up when anxiety crept in, all painted a vivid picture of her state of mind. David's heart pounded fiercely within him, yet his visage betrayed no emotion. He feigned disinterest, yet his gaze trailed her every movement as she approached the table. As Charlotte drew near, he offered a subtle nod, an unspoken invitation for her to take a seat. Charlotte drew the chair back, repositioned her bag, and settled into her seat with a deep, weary exhale. For a fleeting moment, they lingered in complete stillness. An unseen barrier seemed to separate them, constructed from their shared experiences, the losses they had endured, and the remnants of what once was. They gazed at one another, yet in that moment, they appeared as two unfamiliar souls, burdened by the haunting sensation of having once been everything to one another. David gripped his coffee cup tightly, yet it remained untouched since its arrival. Charlotte rested her hands on the table, her fingers intertwined, as if summoning the bravery to voice the words that lingered unspoken. She inhaled deeply, readjusted the strap of her bag once more, and with a soft, almost reluctant tone, expressed her gratitude for his willingness to meet. She expressed her presence as a necessity, a yearning to unburden herself of a heavy load she had borne for far too long. Her words emerged with a deliberate slowness, as though each one bore a weight before it was released into the air. David held his tongue, his gaze fixed intently upon her. His expression revealed neither anger nor sadness, nor even a glimmer of hope. It seemed he had mastered the art of shielding himself from the tumult of feelings this woman could stir within him. The waiter glided over, presenting the menu with a polite inquiry about any additional desires. With a casual wave of his hand, David signaled that all was well. Charlotte merely requested a glass of water. With the departure of the waiter, a profound silence enveloped the space that lay between them. With a deep breath, she gathered her thoughts and started to speak. She acknowledged that this gathering might appear peculiar, perhaps even devoid of purpose, yet she felt compelled to face her own specters. For an extended period, she endeavored to persuade herself that progress would be effortless, that turning a blind eye to the past would be enough. Yet life was determined to demonstrate the contrary. Her hands quivered, and occasionally, she concealed them, attempting to mask the tremor. David, however, maintained his focus on the window, watching the cars, the passers-by, anything that might distract him from the memories that were inevitably surfacing in his mind. Though his gaze did not meet hers, he hung on every word, taking in each syllable as if he understood that from this moment forward, everything might shift, or perhaps remain utterly unchanged. Though unspoken, an understanding lingered between them, a recognition that this meeting held a significance far greater than any moment they had experienced since the day their world unraveled. Charlotte cradled the glass of water in her hands, as though it were the sole anchor preventing her fingers from quaking further. For a fleeting moment, she gazed at the liquid undulating within, searching for a gentler path to commence, yet she came to understand that none existed. She released a breath through her lips and began to speak. She remarked that everything had appeared innocuous at the outset. Light exchanges in the corridor, fleeting jests shared among individuals, professional communications that slowly meandered into more arbitrary subjects. David stood still, his eyes fixed on the window, yet his ears captured every word that floated through the air. Initially, she believed it was merely a bond of friendship. Sebastian possessed a gentle kindness, ever ready to lend an ear, his remarks weaving a tapestry of appreciation that enveloped her in a warmth she had long been without. Discussions that once unfolded within the confines of the office began to spill out into the world beyond. Initially, there were messages exchanged on social media, followed by the sharing of secrets she had kept hidden from everyone but David. It was at that moment that everything began to unravel. Charlotte clenched her fingers tightly, her knuckles paling to a stark white. She reminisced that their initial encounter beyond the confines of work had not been orchestrated. Sebastian extended an invitation for coffee, a small reprieve after a particularly taxing day. She acquiesced, believing it would merely end there. Yet, on that day, she came to understand that something had shifted. She expressed a sense of vitality, a longing, as though a spark within her that had been extinguished had been reignited. Before she was fully aware, a longing for these encounters began to take root within her. The dialogues grew increasingly frequent, steeped in a deeper intimacy. They began their clandestine gatherings in plain sight, initially choosing public venues, but soon gravitated towards more hidden and private settings. That fateful night, beneath the dim glow of the parking lot lights, they crossed a line when their lips met after the company event. She admitted she attempted to persuade herself it was merely an error, that it would conclude with that kiss. Yet, beneath the surface, she was acutely aware that this was only the beginning. David's eyes wandered aimlessly beyond the window, yet his hold on the coffee cup was so fierce that it appeared as though he might shatter it with his grip. Charlotte quietly brushed away a tear that had slipped down her cheek, tucked her hair behind her ear, and pressed on. She expressed that she had never intended to shatter the marriage, nor did she foresee it evolving into a parallel relationship. Yet she allowed herself to be swept away. In that moment of clarity, she understood that she had been navigating the complexities of a double existence all along. Throughout the day, she adhered to her routine alongside David. Amidst family dinners filled with laughter, plans for trips, and the spaces in between, she sought refuge in Sebastian's embrace. Messages erased, fabricated alibis, spontaneous escapades, and an ever-present dread of being found out. She lingered for a moment, inhaling deeply, and admitted that there were times when she felt she could sustain this delicate equilibrium indefinitely, managing both lives with grace. Until chaos erupted in the most catastrophic manner imaginable. David arrived home sooner than expected, only to discover the two of them within the familiar confines of their own dwelling. With her head bowed and eyes tightly shut, she attempted to banish the haunting image from her mind, fully aware of the futility of her efforts. She remarked that she would always remember David's expression that day, a moment when she experienced an overwhelming mix of shame, regret, and fear, and from that moment forth, all that she understood crumbled into dust. Uncontrollable tears streamed down her face, and she ceased to care about concealing them. After all was revealed, David chose to depart, she remarked, and with him departed all that she recognized as existence. In the weeks that followed, she found herself residing at a friend's house, her mind clouded and thoughts elusive. Each object nestled within her suitcase whispered echoes of her past, stirring memories of what had slipped through her fingers: garments, literature, and even a humble toothbrush appeared to bear an overwhelming burden. She sought to occupy that emptiness with anything she could find. She immersed herself in her work, enrolled in courses, sought out new acquaintances, ventured out, busied herself with distractions, and embraced novel experiences. She ventured into relationships with others, yet none of those connections resonated with any significance. All felt contrived, robotic, devoid of spirit. The apartment she rented resembled an empty box rather than a true home. She would awaken, survey her surroundings, and be enveloped by that suffocating stillness. She sought refuge in movies, TV shows, and books, yet the moment silence enveloped her, her mind unleashed a torrent of haunting memories. She recalled the dinners they once shared, the languid Sundays spent watching whatever happened to be on TV, the journeys they embarked upon, the aspirations they crafted together, the dreams that now felt as far away as they were beyond reach. I end this cycle. She came to a profound realization. Everything she believed she was searching for beyond the confines of her marriage had, in truth, always existed within her grasp, only to be recognized after it was lost. In the meantime, David ventured down an entirely distinct road. He gathered his belongings and chose to create some space between himself and the world around him. He journeyed to destinations he had long yearned to explore, unearthing joys that had faded from memory over time. He rekindled old passions, embraced a renewed commitment to fitness, forged new connections, and granted himself the freedom to truly live. He took care to hold onto the essence of his identity, the person he had been before everything changed. As the months unfolded, he came to understand that, for the first time in many years, he had found a sense of tranquility within himself. He engaged in a handful of brief relationships, maintaining a careful distance, yet each encounter fortified his resolve that his happiness would forever remain independent of another's influence. He discovered the importance of self-acceptance, cultivating respect for himself, and cherishing his own presence. He realized that not every emptiness requires the presence of another, for at times, what is truly lacking is the ability to gaze upon oneself with greater compassion. And when that realization dawned upon him, he found that he no longer bore anger, pain, or resentment. He bore with him the understanding that certain injuries mend, yet they forever etch their marks upon the soul, wounds that, rather than diminishing, ultimately fortify those who endure them. Charlotte brushed her tears away with delicate fingertips, inhaled deeply, and for a fleeting moment, gazed at her own hand as if she were sorting through the thoughts swirling in her mind. The weight of the silence enveloped them, more profound than any words she could muster, yet somehow, she summoned the courage to press on. Her voice emerged softer, trembling, yet infused with an unmistakable essence that David recognized at once: regret. A regret that felt as though it bore down on every fiber of her being. She gazed deeply into his eyes and declared, with utmost clarity, that regardless of how ridiculous it may seem, her love for him had never wavered. She conveyed that it had taken her an extensive amount of time to grasp what was genuinely significant in life. She expressed that during her time enveloped in that illusion with Sebastian, she believed she was on a quest for something novel, something distinct, something to fulfill what, in her perception, was lacking. Yet, in the aftermath of her losses, she came to understand that the emptiness she sought to remedy externally had always resided within her, and that David had never truly been the issue. She expressed that he had always been her sanctuary, her closest companion, her beloved, and that it was she who had recklessly cast it all aside, failing to contemplate the repercussions. Her hands quivered with such intensity that she felt compelled to cross her arms, seeking to regain a semblance of control. She confessed to having devoted months to contemplating how to secure a second chance, rehearsing countless times the words she would utter if he consented to this meeting. She expressed her disbelief that he could just erase everything, acknowledging the difficulty of the situation, yet despite that, she felt compelled to make an attempt. For even the slightest glimmer of hope in reconstructing it all was a chance she couldn't afford to lose. Her apology unfolded in a manner that left David utterly astonished. Every word appeared to wound her deeper than it did him. She sought absolution for each falsehood, every act of treachery. Every evening he endured in ignorance of the deceit that surrounded him. She expressed that, should he permit it, she would approach everything in an entirely different manner. Her desire extended beyond mere repairs. She yearned to create something entirely new, far more resilient and authentic. She articulated the understanding that the past is immutable, that some wounds will forever bear their marks. Yet, she also recognized that those who genuinely love one another possess the strength to transcend even the gravest of errors, provided both are committed to the journey of healing. Her voice wavered, her chin trembled, and her eyes beseeched for a reply she inwardly dreaded. David regarded her with a seriousness that was both calm and intense, his gaze familiar yet now shrouded in an impenetrable mystery. He paused for a moment, inhaling deeply, as though he were sorting through his own feelings before uttering a word. As he commenced to speak, his voice emerged resolute, unwavering in its strength. He expressed his understanding of her emotions, conveying his belief in her regret, and acknowledging the immense burden she bore for all that had transpired. He remarked that her apologies were no longer necessary, for he had already embraced the art of forgiveness. He emphasized that the act of forgiveness was not intended for her, but rather for his own peace. He realized that clinging to bitterness is akin to slowly poisoning oneself each day, all the while wishing for the other to suffer. He made the decision to heal, to liberate himself from the pain that had bound him, to reconstruct his very essence. Yet, in that same steady and composed manner, he conveyed that although he had forgiven her, the love that had once thrived between them had faded away. He claimed that love perished the moment he stepped through the threshold of his own abode and beheld a sight forever etched in his memory. Despite the challenges he faced, he managed to reconstruct his identity in her absence. In that journey, he discovered that embracing oneself holds greater significance than desperately holding on to someone who opted to shatter all they had created together. He had long envisioned that day, imagining a moment when she might return, seeking another opportunity. Yet, as that day unfolded, he came to the profound realization that his feelings had shifted irrevocably. And as enchanting as their tale had once been, it now resided firmly in the annals of the past, and his present was veering onto an alternate course. Charlotte pressed her lips together, shut her eyes tightly, and allowed the tears to cascade down her cheeks. She attempted to speak, yet silence enveloped her, leaving her voiceless. Her hands gripped her leg beneath the table, as if striving to maintain her composure, to keep her body from crumbling in that very moment. Her chest heaved with each breath, as though the very act of inhaling demanded a price far too steep. With a slight shake of her head, she brushed away her tears in a haphazard manner and rose to her feet, choosing silence over words. Her bag slipped from her shoulder, teetering on the edge of disaster. With an awkward adjustment, she inhaled deeply once more and hurried off, almost stumbling over her own feet. David inhaled deeply, locking eyes with Charlotte for a brief moment, and with a steady yet calm voice, expressed his gratitude for their encounter, despite all that had transpired. It seemed that engaging in this conversation held significant meaning for him. It marked a definitive conclusion to a chapter that had lingered in uncertainty for far too long. He expressed that he had released all anger and resentment, and with genuine sincerity, he wished her peace, hoping she would rediscover herself, heal, and progress onward. Though the love had faded, the reverence for the history they had woven together remained intact. It was out of deep respect for all that had transpired that he felt compelled to bid farewell in this manner, clear, composed, and resolute. He retrieved his wallet, extracted a few bills, subtly tucked them beneath the coffee cup, and rose to his feet. He gazed into her eyes one final time, offered a subtle nod, and softly uttered, "Take care, Eleanor." Without pausing for a reply, he pivoted away and strode toward the door. With every stride, he sensed the burdens of yesteryear slipping away, as if his very essence recognized that this chapter was at last drawing to a close. Charlotte remained there, frozen in place, her gaze fixed on the table, as she fought to contain the tears that, moments later, began to spill forth without restraint. She attempted to wipe them away with the palms of her hands, with her fingers, yet it felt utterly futile. Her chest constricted, her breath hitched, and a singular, anguished cry echoed within her. She had been defeated. Indeed, irrevocably. The man who had once pledged his everlasting love to her had become nothing more than a fleeting memory, a shattered tale that could never be mended. As she struggled in vain to regain her composure, David made his way across the street. Opposite the cafe lay a park, and there, perched upon a bench, sat Sophie. She was already aware of the unfolding events. She was aware that David had orchestrated this encounter with his former wife, and, to her astonishment, it was she who urged him to attend. She recognized that for David to embrace a genuine love, he had to finally close the chapter that lingered, unresolved, in his heart. As he drew near, she rose to her feet, offered a gentle smile, took his hand, and, locking her gaze with his, inquired, "And thus, how did it unfold?" David inhaled deeply, surveying his surroundings as if to ensure that the past remained precisely where it belonged, and replied with a serene smile gracing his lips, "It was truly remarkable. At last, I can close that chapter of my life that lingered, waiting to be turned." Sophie smiled, drawing him nearer, as they strolled side by side through the park, hands intertwined, engaged in conversation about the present, their aspirations, and the life they were crafting together. In that instant, David experienced one of the most profound certainties of his existence. The past no longer held a place in his future. Meanwhile, across the street, Charlotte waged her own internal struggle. After a few moments of solitude, tears streaming down her cheeks at the table, she composed herself as best she could, gathered her belongings, rose to her feet, and departed. She ambled with her gaze cast downward, her heart heavy, burdened by the decisions she had taken and the unforeseen repercussions that now loomed before her. She approached her car, her hands shaking as she unlocked the doors. Once inside, she slammed the door shut with a force that echoed her turmoil, and in that moment, she succumbed to her emotions once more. The world appeared to crumble around her, and the anguish surged within her, surpassing any suffering she had ever known, and thus, the tale reached its conclusion. Each of them ventured forth on their own paths, inhabiting entirely distinct realms of existence. David, buoyed by a sense of liberation, stands poised to embrace a fresh romance and a vibrant new chapter in his life. Charlotte bore the weight of her actions, having shattered with her own hands all that had once been the most precious gift life had bestowed upon her. From that moment onward, their paths would never cross again. Each transformed into a mere echo in the other's existence, a recollection that, while indelibly etched in their minds, would never suffice to alter the trajectories they each decided to pursue. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. If you found it enjoyable, be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to stay updated on all the latest content. Until we meet again.